So 500 years ago in Mondstadt, the Knights of Favonius were led by the Grand Master Arundhalein and his second-in-command Rostam. Rostam is most famous among the Genshin community for being La Signora's dead lover, but he also trained a student known only as the White Knight. The White Knight is, to say the least, a little bit obsessed with chivalry, justice, and swordsmanship, but he's all around a pretty decent dude. He's apparently also incredibly attractive since he rescues a maiden, speaks a grand total of maybe 2 lines to her, leaves, and the maiden spends the rest of her life dreaming about him and lusting after him and refusing to marry anyone else, though him being a noble might have helped with that too. However, like every single other person who was alive 500 years ago, the cataclysm arrived and basically ruined his life. Between failing to save a village from being massacred and Rostam being killed, the White Knight vowed to rid the world of all monsters and evil, and also apparently poverty, though I'm not really sure where destroying capitalism factored into his actions or motivations. Now dubbed the Bloodstained Knight due to killing and murdering many, many monsters and becoming covered in blood, the knight wandered around for a while slaughtering monsters. As an unfortunate side effect of becoming evil, he also apparently became ugly, because as everyone knows, only ugly people can be evil, and all evil people are ugly. That was satirical, in case you couldn't tell, but it is true that the Bloodstained Knight's face eventually became so hideous that he had to cover it under a mask to prevent people from running away in fear. Pretty big downgrade from the hot guy he used to be. Eventually, after the Bloodstained Knight realized he'd become akin to the monsters he'd sworn to slay, he decided to go on a suicide mission and get himself killed fighting monsters. It's worth noting that in Bloodstained Final Hour it states that the knight died fighting monsters, but this is a mistranslation, and should more accurately read the knight deciding to die fighting monsters instead. Also, since we see the knight alive later, it's clearly inaccurate to say that he died there. So the Bloodstained Knight headed down to Khaenri'ah but with this goal in mind, but instead of dying, when he reached Khaenri'ah, he found out the truth behind the Khaenri'ahs being cursed into monsters by the gods. Because he was big on justice and chivalry and righteousness and all that stuff, he decided this was unjust and swore himself to the abyss. Meanwhile, as the Bloodstained Knight ran around killing stuff, his blind little brother back home was very sad and very lonely. This younger brother, who was either incredibly lonely or not very intelligent or maybe a combination of both, decided to chase after his older brother. How old was he? Not sure, but he's described as a youth and apparently thought it was a great idea to traverse a land filled with monsters on his own. As one might have expected, the blind boy ended up severely injured and almost dead. However, despite failing to find his brother, he did manage to roll that 0.6% gotcha 5-star luck by first finding the bow hunter's path and then dying under the Viridescent Venerer's napping tree. The Viridescent Venerer has a whole story of her own, but for the purposes of the Bloodstained Knight's lore, what matters is that with his dying breath, the younger brother gave the Viridescent Venerer the bow and requested that she kill monsters, and then he died. Honoring his request, the Viridescent Venerer put down her old bow, the Viridescent Hunt, took up Hunter's Path, and went to go slaughter monsters. Sound like anyone else you know? Back to the Bloodstained Knight, my guy swore his loyalty to the Abyss, presumably specifically to the Abyss Order, and then popped out of Khaenri'ah and started wandering westward. Where precisely he was trying to get is unclear, but he was going in that direction to find justice for the Khaenri'ahs. Maybe Celestia? Not sure. In any case, on this trip, the Bloodstained Knight encountered none other than the Viridescent Venerer. Now, up until this point, every time the Bloodstained Knight thinks to himself, I am one of the monsters I swore to kill, it all feels very melodramatic and poetically ironic and whatever else. And when the Viridescent Venerer looks down at her own reflection in the water and thinks, I am a wild beast now, you're probably thinking, metaphors, my favorite. But when the Bloodstained Knight stumbles across the Viridescent Venerer, he looks at her, sees a beast, and promptly proceeds to murder her, with only a few seconds of thought at the end about, I thought I saw a maiden, but there was only a beast. Which suddenly brings into question if this transforming into a beast/monster thing is literal, since the Bloodstained Knight genuinely didn't recognize the Viridescent Venerer as a human, and she was able to realize she was a beast by seeing her reflection. But if so, how in the world does that happen? No clue, and it's still a bit dubious if it's metaphorical or literal, though literal would also explain the Bloodstained Knight's, transformation into being ugly. In any case, after his brutal sword murder of a semi-innocent woman who was only a killer at his younger brother's request, the Bloodstained Knight kept wandering westward, and we haven't heard from him since. The end. Onto a bit of trivia about the Bloodstained Knight, which I am including because he is my favorite character in the world, and I desperately hope and pray he will get more lore in the future, and I am not high and coping at all. Well, his name might be Roland, since in Rostam's dying moments he thinks of 3 people. 1, his best friend and brother in all but blood, Arundhalein. 2, his lover and girlfriend Signora, aka Rosalind Kruska Loha Falter, long name. 3, some random guy named Roland. Since there's no indication of any third person being close to Rostam, said random guy has a decent but unconfirmed confirmed chance of being the Bloodstained Knight. And since this lowers from 1.5 and we still haven't gotten an answer, we might just never get an answer to that. Also, apparently he was very gentle, or at least his brother saw him as being very gentle, so there's some more of that poetic irony and narrative parallels and what have you with the Viridescent Venerer, who was a protector of the forest herself, and then the two of them both became killers in the Cataclysm, maybe literal, maybe metaphorical monsters, and then one died at the hand of the other. That's all for now, but stay tuned if you are interested in the Bloodstained Knight, because I am planning to do a video analyzing whether or not Capitano could be the Bloodstained Knight. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks, and have a good day.